Hey friends, we are so excited to be starting this Hope campaign alongside of all of you. We have been talking about this for several weeks now, and I'm excited that today we get to dive in and talk about hope. And boy, do I need hope more than ever these days, and I hope you feel the same way.
So we're glad to be here with you, whether that's in your home or on a Zoom call or maybe even in a room here at the church. I just want to make sure that we get to know each other as we start this study. So in the group that you're in, whether big or small, let's spend a little time getting to know each other.
I'm JD.
And I'm Jesse.
And we're originally from Indiana. We are married. We've got a couple of kids. And we moved out here in 2014. And we've been a part of this church community for the last 7 years. And we love our church family.
So that is a little bit about us. And now I want you to get to know the people around you a little bit. So share your name and just a little bit about yourself. We're going to keep this brief. Not your whole life story, just the basics. So, if you have kids, you're married, grand hopes and dreams, whatever you'd like to share, no big pressure, just keep it simple and brief.
And then after you're done doing that, I want you to spend some time talking about if you feel like you're a hopeful person or not. I think I'm a pretty hopeful person. I try to see, the bright side of things. So I guess I would say I'm more hopeful than hopeless, or, more hope than not hope. So I would encourage you to talk about that a little bit, and whether you think you're a hopeful person or not so hopeful person. And then after we're done talking about those things for just a couple minutes, Micah is going to come on, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about hope.
Back in the year 2000, 20 years ago, a man named Rick Snyder went on Good Morning America. Rick was a scientist, and what he studied was hope. He was big, one of the first people to really study the science of hope. And he went on Good Morning America, and it was the three guys, there were three men that were the anchors of Good Morning America. He went on there, and he showed them an experiment in hope. So the first thing he did is he brought out 3 buckets full of really, really cold, in fact, icy water. So 3 ice water buckets. And he challenged each of the men to see how long they could put their hand in the bucket, how long they could keep their hand intentionally in this freezing cold water. And okay, we'll do that. And so everybody put their hand in. One guy bailed out relatively quickly, the weatherman, he was out. But the other 2 guys were competitive. They were trying, like, who can stay in the longest, right? And so they went, and none of us remember who the anchors were back then, but one eventually beat the other. They all pull their hands out. They, trying to get feeling back in their hands, and they started having this conversation. What does this have to do with hope, right? What does me sticking my hand in a frozen water bucket do? Tell us about hope. And the man Rick Snyder revealed something that was fascinating. He said, "Hey, before we did this, I had each of the 3 of you take an assessment where I just assessed how hopeful you were in general. How much hope do you have? Not anything to do with this water, but just how hopeful of a person are you? Based on that, I predicted the order in which you guys would have to bail out of this water bucket. I predicted how long you would be able to endure the pain of this freezing water." And he laid it out, and lo and behold, his predictions were correct. Now, this is not just a one-off thing. This has been done many, many times before by, at this point, a number of people. And what we have learned is that things like hope, which seem squishy, which seem kind of nebulous, which seem unclear about how you would look at it or measure it or think about it, things like hope actually have a very significant impact in the way that we live our life, in our ability to handle pain, in our ability to overcome challenges. Hope is actually a really important thing. And we as a society just kind of talk about it a little bit here and there, but we are not a hopeful society, I don't think. We're not a society of hope. We don't have a culture of hope. And that's something that we want to change in the next 6 weeks. Now, I know we're not going to change everything in the next 6 weeks, but at least in our group, we could be a group full of hope in the next 6 weeks. So let's talk for a minute about what we're doing and where we're going. All right, I'll come back to the hope thing in a minute. First off, I'm glad that you're here. This is it. This is week 1 of a 6-week series called the Hope Campaign, and I think this is going to be I'm hoping that this is going to be life-changing for at least some of us. Now, if you're somebody who always is full of hope and you're always living in hope and everything about you is hopeful, then you might say, well, this is just more of the same. This is every day for me. But most of us aren't that way. Most of us have times when it's hard to hope, when it's hard to hold on to hope, when it's hard to have hope. And so I think this is going to be really good. I think we're going to work through this together. Now today, we're going to talk about the science of hope. Now all my cards on the table, I'm a pastor at a church, a local church. And so when I talk, you might be tempted to think, hey, like this is the God guy talking and he's going to talk about God stuff. And we will eventually, but really today, we're just going to talk about the science of hope. This is something that if you don't really ever go to church, if you don't ever really think about God, if you're not sure about that, or if you're questioning some of those things, you don't have to have any faith in a higher power to believe what we talk about today. All right? Because everything that we're talking about is the very best, the most cutting edge, the best information that we've been able to find about hope and what it means to have it, how we get it, how we share it. So today you can kind of let your guard down. You can put your guard back up later, but for today, let's just talk about the science of hope, okay? So people that have high hope can stand as much as twice as much pain as people that have very low hope. People that have high hope have better results for almost every different medical thing that you can name. The better results for things like cancer, better results for things like heart disease, better results for various different types of elective and unelective surgeries. People that have high hope tend to be healthier in general, physically, socially, mental health. All these things tie in with hope. And yet, hope is not something that we talk a lot about. In fact, when we talk about hope, a lot of times what we're talking about is not really hope. We use the word hope kind of interchangeably with a bunch of other things. So what is hope? Well, first of all, let's talk about what hope isn't, okay? Hope isn't a general sense of optimism. Now, you know some people probably that are optimists, right? You probably know some people that are pessimists. Optimists will tell you that they're optimists. Pessimists never tell you they're pessimists. They always say, I'm a realist, right? But so when we talk about hope, at least in the context of what we're doing today, we're not talking about optimism or pessimism, a general feeling of the glass is half full or it's half empty. All right, there are people who are optimists by nature, as they're wired, that's just their personality, who nevertheless can be in a place where they're very much hopeless. And there are people that can be pessimists. Oh, well, it's just things never go the way I hope they will. Hope they will. But even pessimists can have hope. So it's not kind of a general feeling of optimism and pessimism. Hope is also not the same thing as wishes. Now, a lot of times we use the words interchangeably. When we say, I hope it doesn't rain tomorrow, what we really mean is, I wish it wouldn't rain tomorrow, right? I hope I do well on this test. I hope I get that promotion. These are not actually hopes in the true sense. They're just things that we kind of wish for, right? They're wishes. The problem is that actually a lot of the things that we would say I hope for are actually not even positive wishes, they're negative wishes. I hope it doesn't rain is not actually a hope about the weather, it is a fear about the weather. If I say I hope we get good weather tomorrow, sometimes, it's possible, hey, I hope this goes well, we're going to do this event outside. But a lot of times what I'm actually expressing is I am afraid that it's not going to be good tomorrow. I hope this sickness passes quickly. What we're actually saying is I'm afraid that this is going to last a long time, right? It's just a way of couching our language. And the reality is that fear for the future is a reasonable thing, right? If bad things are coming at us, if we anticipate bad things coming at us, then we experience fear. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't, all right? But understanding the difference between fear and hope is important. Fear is when we anticipate that something bad is going to happen to us. Hope is when we anticipate something good, right? Hope is the anticipation of good, where fear is the anticipation of evil, or the anticipation of pain, the anticipation of bad. And so what is anticipation? When I say anticipation, what do I mean by that? I don't mean a wish. I don't mean a dream. When we say that hope is the anticipation of good, what we mean is that there is a clear picture of what it is that I want, and then there's also, when we anticipate something, it means that there is a path that gets us there. All right? Now, in the scientific literature, hope actually has three parts. Hope is made up of three things. The first is a goal. There is a preferred future. There's something on the horizon. There's something that we're striving for, something that we want, something that we're trying to get to. The second part is a pathway. There has to be some path that gets you from where you are to where you want to be. There has to be some series of events or things that can be overcome, or something that gets you from here to there, right? If you don't have that, you don't have a pathway, you don't have hope. The last thing is there has to be some level of agency or willpower desire, willingness to put the work in, all right? And all of these things together are what it takes to have hope. If you don't have all three of those things, then according to the people that study hope, they would say you don't actually yet have hope. Now, the good news is that all of these are things that can be built, that can be generated, that can be helped to exist. And so we can grow in our hope no matter what, all right? So hope is not necessarily good or bad. So let's say I was walking downtown in Cincinnati, right? And I'm walking down a dark alley and somebody says, hey, you, give me your money, right? Now, I might not have a lot of hope in that situation, but the mugger, the person who's trying to take my money, he has a lot of hope. Or she, equal opportunity. But the mugger says, hey, what I want, I have a goal to have some money, right? And I have a pathway that gets me some money. I could take the money from this guy. And then I have agency, I have willpower, I have the ability to follow that path and do what needs doing, right? And so that life of crime might actually be driven by hope of something better. Oh, well, this would be better if I had this money, right? And if I do these things, then I can get there. That's a path and there's agency. So hope is not intrinsically good, but generally speaking, we would rather live in a society that has high hope than a society that has no hope. We would rather live in a family where a lot of people have hope than live in a family where no people have hope. We would rather be in a group where people have hope than where they don't. And so hope actually really matters quite a lot. And we, all things being equal, would rather be around high hope than low hope. So hope doesn't guarantee anything, but it is good to have. The problem that we have as a society is that we as a society are as hopeless as we have ever been. You'd think this is crazy because we've had technological progress, we've had all kinds of things that have happened, things keep getting better in all kinds of good measurable ways, and yet the farther we go, the more things that we solve, that we get more and more into this thing of where we say, it doesn't look as good as I hoped it would, right? All my problems have not been solved. We as a society actually have lower hope than we have had in a long time. And you can see this in a lot of ways. You can see this, first of all, in what we call deaths of despair. Suicide and overdoses are at an all-time high and the number continues to grow. Both of those things are tied directly to a lack of hope. If you look at anybody who's studied suicide as a society-wide phenomenon and overdose as a society-wide phenomenon, always this is linked to low hope by the people that are going through it. Our political climate is characterized by a lack of hope, and guess what? It's just going to get worse this year because it's an election year. But what people on both sides of the aisle seem to have started to say is, you know what? I have lost hope that I'm going to get what I want. I'm not going to get what I want, but at least I can stick it to the other guy, right? I'm going to hurt. If I can't get what I want, I'm at least going to hurt the other guy. We're going to make sure we get our hits in, right? In the midst of all of this hopelessness, what we need are people of hope. In the midst of all of this hopelessness, what we need are people of hope. We need, as a society, as a city, as a state, we need people of hope. And I believe that you have probably known some people of hope in your life. You've probably known some people that when they came into a bad situation, the situation got better just because they were in it, right? You've known some people that could raise the temperature of the room just a little bit, like, man, this is a really good thing. I'm glad this person is here. And so part of our question over this next 6 weeks is like, what would it take for us to be people of hope? What would it take for you and for me and for the people that are sitting around the room? What would it take for all of us to be people of hope? People who had hope, people who can share hope, people who are able to give hope to others. So what we're going to do is we're going to pause for just a second, and we're actually going to take the exact assessment that I talked about a little bit ago. So we're going to pause here. It's going to be on the screen. Also, it might be easier. There's going to be a link to an app or a link to a website that you can take it electronically if you don't want to have to do math. But you're going to take the assessment and you're going to get a total score. And then we're going to come back and talk about kind of just where we're at. Honestly, just going to look at ourselves and say, man, some of us are going to say, man, I got a lot of hope. Others are going to say, I don't feel like I have a lot of hope. We're going to talk about that. We're going to make a brief plan for where we can go from here. And then, I'll tell you the rest when we get back. So go ahead and pause. Take the assessment together as a group. You can talk about it, answer the question there. Does this feel right? Does this feel about what you expected? And then we'll jump in and we'll go from there. Thanks, guys. All right, welcome back. How was that? Been a while since you've taken a test, maybe? An assessment, we're gonna call it an assessment. When I took it, it was surprising. I feel like I'm a pretty hopeful person, but there were some answers I thought, oh, I never really thought about it quite like that. It was interesting for me. I hope it was interesting for you. Here's how this works. Questions 2, 4, 6, and 8 are on agency. Questions 1, 3, 5, and 7 are on pathways. So the things that we talked about, we said, remember, hope in the scientific literature, the most cutting edge stuff that we have, says that basically there's a goal, there's a place that we want to get to, and then do you have a pathway that gets you there, and then do you have the willpower to walk the path, all right? And so the test the assessment looked at that and said, okay, do you have a pathway? Do you have agency? Do you have willpower? Do you have a way to get where you're going? So what we're going to do actually is, because I think of everything as a visual, we're going to throw a visual on the screen here, and it's just going to help us to understand kind of where we're at, all right? So if we have a high pathway score and we have a high agency score, then what we're going to have, according to this model, is high hope, all right? If we have low pathway score and a low agency score, then we have low hope. We're hopeless, or I think we're going to use the word, we have apathy, right? Now, what happens if we have a very high, if we're high with pathway, we feel like, man, we've got a path that gets us there, but we don't have the capacity to walk that path, all right? If our pathway score is high, but our agency score is low, then what we tend to have is rage. We tend to have anger, frustration. That tends to be a situation where we have a lot of rage. Or if we have a low pathway score but high agency score, we tend to have despair. Now you think despair is different, that's like apathy, isn't it? No, despair is different from apathy. Apathy is, I don't even care anymore, nothing matters, I'm not even gonna try. Despair is when I just think I can't possibly see a way that gets me from here to there. Now both of these things obviously work in tandem with each other, right? Rage and despair can alternate, can go back and forth, so it's not always one or always the other. Sometimes people waffle back and forth. But these two things together are the enemies of hope, right? Both of these things drag us back towards apathy and hopelessness if we're not careful. But in both of these cases, if we can make a plan, if we can build an approach that works, we can actually drive towards more hope. So part of our conversation today is going to be, what do you need? What is your path to hope? What does it take for you to get up and to the right, right? Maybe for some of you, you think, man, I need encouragement. I need support. I need some care. I need somebody to tell me it's going to be okay, right? For others, maybe you're thinking, man, I don't have a path forward. I don't see how to get to where I'm going. I don't know what it's supposed to look like. Maybe for a lot of us, we just don't even have any real goals that we're hoping for. We don't really have a thing that we think, well, we're just kind of doing life. You know, I'm bebopping my way through, and I get up in the morning, I go to work, I take the kids to school, I come home, I eat, I put the kids in bed, I binge watch a little bit of Netflix, I go to bed, I do it again the next day, right? So maybe for some of us, we just need to say, what are the goals that we have? Where do I want to be? What would life look like if it was better? So hope is built of goals and pathways and agency. And the time we have left, we're going to talk about that a little bit more, all right? So I'm going to break here. We're going to go to your group. We're going to have some time for you to both get to know each other a little bit better and also just talk through some of these pieces. What are the things that we hope for, dream for? Where are we going? So, and what's it going to take to get there? So we'll go ahead and break there, and then I will see you next week.
All right, so what do you think? Do you feel like your hope score is accurate? Did you test high? Did you test kind of low? Share with your group if you feel like the score you got was right on or maybe totally off.
And then I encourage you to think about your week ahead. And we're going to think about an action step that you could take to sort of step into this whole idea of hope in your life. So if you feel like you're needing more hope, what can you do to seek it out or invite hope into your life? Or what are you going to do to appreciate all the hopeful things that are already part of your life? So I want you to think of an actual action step for this week.
And remember, this is going to be a journey, a process, and we're in this together. So please rely on your groups. Let's do this together and take a step into hope.